Dawn broke over the Wyoming plains like a slow breath after years of holding it in. The sky hung heavy with rain clouds, and beneath their bruised gray edges stood a ranch no one had spoken kindly of in years. Its roof sagged, its fences leaned like tired old men, and its wooden sign, half swallowed by moss, still bore the name Renfield. The wind passed through its bones and made a sound like sighing. Clara Wren stepped down from a wagon with one gloved hand still gripping the reins. Her hat brim dripped with the remnants of last night's storm. The deed was folded in her coat pocket, bought fair and legal for exactly $1. Behind her, the driver flicked the reins and left her there alone with the wind and the ghosts. They said the land was cursed, she murmured, eyes traveling over the skeletal barn, the crooked porch, the emptiness. I didn't mind ghosts. They're quieter than the living. The ground squelched beneath her boots as she crossed to the porch. A loose shutter banged once in the wind. In the distance, the town of Mercy Hollow blinked with morning light, too far to call for help, close enough to gossip. Clara turned the doorknob and stepped inside. The smell of dust and rain-warped wood filled her lungs. The place was tired, but so was she. By midday, her wagon was unloaded. A single trunk, a stack of sheet music, a chipped teapot. From the dirt road, a few townsfolk watched her like someone approaching a grave. At the post office that afternoon, whispers followed her like a trailing skirt. She bought the Avery place. Didn't even know there's still a horse in that barn. Poor thing won't last the winter. Behind the counter, Mrs. May Harlow slid a letter across and leaned in. You'll hear things about that land, she said kindly, eyes soft with warning. Best not to listen too close at night. The walls remember too much. Clara managed a polite nod, feeling every word settle heavy in her chest. When she returned to the ranch at dusk, the silence had a pulse. The sky bled orange into gray, and the wind carried a sound she couldn't quite name, low, rhythmic, alive. She took up her lantern and followed it to the barn. Dust swirled in golden ribbons as she stepped inside. Every creak of the boards seemed to echo louder than it should. The smell of hay and age filled her senses. She raised the lantern higher. In the far stall, something shifted, a shape, breathing. The light found a pair of eyes, wide, wild, and full of memory. The horse emerged slowly from the dark. Gray, ghost-like, ribs showing through a dull coat. One ear twitched toward her, the other toward the sound of rain on the roof. Her throat tightened. She should have been afraid. Instead, she felt something stranger, a recognition, like finding a photograph of herself she didn't remember taking. Easy, boy, she whispered. He flinched at her voice, but did not move away. For a moment, the only sound was the wind. Then she set the lantern down on the dirt, light flickering across both their faces. That night, she dreamed of footsteps leaving her old home, of a man walking away while a piano gathered dust. She woke before dawn, the sound of hooves faint outside the barn. Days turned to weeks. The horse, she learned, would not eat if she watched, would not drink unless the trough was filled in silence. He was proud, wounded, and stubborn, the kind of creature who had been loved once and left to fend for himself. The townsmen laughed at her persistence. Red Cutter, a broad-shouldered ranch hand, spat tobacco near her boots one morning. Lady can't even tie a halter right. That beast'll eat you alive. Clara said nothing. Shame pricked the back of her throat. Each evening, she stood by the stall a little longer, waiting for a sign of trust that never came. One afternoon, Marshal Cole Avery rode up, quiet as a shadow. His hat brim was soaked from rain, his voice low and courteous. Heard someone bought the Avery place, he said, dismounting. Didn't expect her to last a week. Neither did I, she replied. He chuckled softly, eyes kind but guarded. That horse, name's Ash, belonged to the old man who owned this land. Wouldn't let anyone near him after the fire. I can see why. Cole glanced at her hands, scratched from fences, lined with effort. You patching the place up yourself? I reckon the land and I understand each other, she said. We're both learning how to stand again. He nodded once and went to mend a fence post that didn't quite need fixing. They spoke little else that day, but the silence between them wasn't empty. It was something gentler, almost like prayer. That night, a storm rose from the west. The wind howled through the cracks in the house like an old choir. Rain slashed the windows. Clara lay awake listening, until she heard a crash from the barn. Lantern in hand, She ran barefoot through mud. Lightning turned the sky white as bone. Inside, Ash thrashed against a broken rope, eyes rolling, nostrils flaring. The storm had torn open the roof above his stall. Clara's heart hammered. Every instinct screamed to stay back, but she stepped forward anyway, voice shaking. "Easy, boy. I've got you." She ducked beneath the swinging beam, mud soaking her nightdress. The horse's panic filled the air with heat and fear. She reached for the rope with trembling fingers, whispering steady nonsense, the kind people use to soothe babies and dying things. When she finally freed him, Ash didn't bolt. He stood panting, muscles quivering, and then, slowly, impossibly, rested his heavy head against her shoulder. Rain streamed from the broken roof, mingling with her tears. In that fragile quiet, she pressed her cheek against his mane. "You're not the only one who got left behind," she whispered. Outside, the thunder rolled away, and the barn fell still again. For the first time since she'd arrived, Clara felt the land breathe beneath her feet. Like something long forgotten was waking up. That night, the ranch didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt alive. The morning after the storm broke soft and gold, the kind of light that makes even ruins look holy. Clara stood by the paddock fence with her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, watching steam curl from her coffee. Ash grazed in the open pasture, his coat silver in the sun. Every movement of his head, every flick of his tail, seemed calmer now, as if the storm had carried something away that neither of them needed anymore. She worked quietly in the days that followed. The barn got new hinges, the porch new boards. Each repair made the place feel a little less like a stranger. The house began to smell of soap and bread again, not dust and loss. Sometimes Marshall Avery rode by and helped without asking, fixing a rail here, sharpening a tool there. He rarely said much, but when he did, his words landed softly, like rain on dry earth. Once, he brought a sack of oats for Ash and stayed to lean against the doorway. "He's a fine horse," he said. "He's stubborn," she replied. He smiled. Sometimes that's the same thing. The spring fair came like a sunrise over Mercy Hollow. Bright ribbons, music, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer echoing through the square. Clara hadn't planned to go, but May Harlow sent word that everyone ought to see the lady from Renfield at least once before summer. So she went, wore her cleanest dress, her best boots, and brought Ash along, because she couldn't imagine standing there without him. First, people only stared. Then Red Cutter spotted her and grinned the way wolves do when they smell blood. "Look here," he called to the crowd. The piano widow brought her ghost horse to town. Laughter rippled around her like wind through brittle grass. She should have turned away. Instead, she mounted Ash right there in the open ring. Her heart pounded. Her hands shook. She had no plan, only a need to prove that this land, this horse, and this woman still meant something. The air went still. Someone muttered, "She's lost her mind." Clara nudged Ash forward, her legs trembling. The first few steps were smooth, careful, but when a child's balloon popped nearby, Ash startled, rearing high. The crowd gasped. Clara hit the dirt hard, breath knocked out, pride cracked wide open, but Red's laughter rang through the silence. "Told ya, ghosts don't like company." Cole Avery was there in an instant, offering his hand, but Clara refused it. She stood, brushed the dust from her dress, and took Ash's reins with quiet dignity. Her face burned with humiliation, but her voice didn't waver when she said, "We'll try again another day." No one laughed after that. That evening, she sat on the porch steps long after dark. The piano inside waited, untouched. Ash stood by the corral, head lowered, tail twitching softly. Shame still stung, but beneath it, something new stirred, a fragile kind of pride. She had fallen, yes, but she had stood up on her own. A few nights later, the moon hung like a coin over the hills, and the wind carried the faint cry of a horse. Clara ran to the paddock and found the gate swinging open. Her heart dropped. Ash was gone. She followed the hoof prints into the hills, lantern clutched tight, breath clouding the cold night air. The trail led higher, into a canyon washed pale by moonlight. Then she saw him, trapped near the ravine, his flank caught in barbed wire. He was trembling, bleeding, his eyes wild with fear. "Easy," she whispered, voice breaking. "I'm here." The barbs bit into her hands as she worked. Blood dripped into the dust, and her tears mixed with it. The wire gave way at last, snapping loose with a sharp metallic cry. Ash stumbled free and stood before her, sides heaving. She touched his neck, and he didn't flinch. They stood together in silence. Two creatures torn and mended by the same night, AI, RWY dawn. They made it home. Clara limped slightly, her palms raw, but her heart felt steady for the first time in years. The town awoke to see her leading Ash through the main street, both mud-smeared and exhausted, yet unbroken. N01 spoke this time. Hats were tipped. Doors opened. Respect hung in the air like smoke. That evening, Cole came by again. He didn't mention the whispers, or the fare, or the blood on her bandaged hands. He just poured coffee into 2 tin cups and sat beside her on the porch. "Looks like you both found your footing," he said quietly. Clara smiled, watching Ash graze beyond the fence. "He just needed to know someone wouldn't give up. Maybe you did too." They sat until the sky blushed into violet. The world seemed to hold its breath as the last note of day slipped away. Inside, the piano waited. Clara's fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. The keys were uneven and yellowed, but the first note rang pure. Another followed. Then another. A melody emerged, hesitant, tender, full of open sky. Cole listened from the doorway, hat in his hands. "Heard music carries further out here," he said softly. "Maybe it's meant to," she replied. Outside, Ash whinnied once, a low, contented sound that filled the empty spaces between the notes. Weeks later, the ranch looked almost whole again. The fields grew green, the barn stood strong. Folks passing by swore they could hear a woman's laughter drifting through the cottonwoods, or a piano playing just after dusk. And sometimes, when the wind blew from the west, it carried the faint scent of rain and forgiveness. They said you can't buy peace. But for $1, Clara Wren bought a chance to listen, to a horse that remembered kindness, to a land that forgave, to a heart that still had songs left in it. If you ever find yourself among ruins, don't rebuild too fast. Sit with the silence. Sometimes the wild will teach you how to begin again.